Sword Art Online, the anime that is largely responsible for popularizing the Isekai genre. Yeah, there were plenty of Isekai before Sword Art, and many of them were popular and important in their own right and time, but this was the anime that ushered in the Isekai Renaissance. Or the Dark Ages, depending on how you look at it. Because for the next decade, every season we had at least 6 million new isekai that were trying to get some of that Kirito Kane. And it worked out for some of them. Re:Zero just got a new season, Overlord keeps getting new additions, and even the Slime anime is still getting some love. But most of the isekai from the 2010s only ever got a single season, and for most of them, no one wanted a single season more. These shows had no soul. They just had one gimmick that they were oh so proud of, and that was it. That was the show. The setting was always the same, the story was generic, the characters even more so, and the animation was usually nothing special. Isekai quickly became something that just meant a ridiculous title and an absurd premise that somehow always turned stale after just a couple of episodes. I still don't know how they made a vending machine isekai boring. But there was one show that stood out against the slop, and still does to this day. It wasn't another power fantasy, and it wasn't another self-aware parody. The characters weren't special somebodies summoned for a particular purpose, they were nobodies who had no idea what was even going on. And they weren't on a quest to kill the demon lord, get the princess, and save the world. They were fighting goblins so they could afford breakfast and new underwear. This wasn't just another isekai, formulaic and forgettable. This was something different, something less sanitized, something more real. This was a show called Grimgar. Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash, or Grimgar Ashes and Illusions. I'm a little confused on what the actual title is. Grimgar is one of those anime that is difficult to label. Is it a hidden gem? Nah, it's pretty well known. Not popular enough to get a season 2, but still plenty popular. Is it an underrated masterpiece? Well, now that depends on what you want from a show. If you're looking for a traditional hero's journey in a fantasy world, then this one sucks. If you're looking for an old school trapped in a fantasy world story, then this one still sucks. And if you're looking for a standard isekai power fantasy, then yeah, this one really sucks. But if you're interested in something slow, something that borders on slice of life, where there really isn't a set destination or goal for our heroes besides waking up tomorrow and chatting with friends about life, then this show is actually pretty great.
春広は飲めるの？
どうだろう。飲んだことはあるかな。ないかも。
A bunch of random people from our world find themselves in a new one with no memory of how they got there, why they are there, or even where they came from. All they know is their names and that they now have to join some army and fight monsters for the sake of this new world. All of the stronger people form their own adventuring party, while the genetic dead ends band together out of necessity. Each person has a set role. Someone needs to heal, someone needs to tank, and someone needs to be the DPS. It's less like a video game and more like a tabletop adventure, but more serious than D&D. Or at least the campaigns I play. What I'm trying to say is that this anime has a very realistic approach to combat and party management. There are still classes and skills and levels and all that, but they aren't tied up to menus and XP. If you want to be a priest, then you gotta go to the temple and have them train you. And when someone learns a skill, it isn't the result of ranking up or completing some challenge. It is a technique that is honed through training and guidance. There's no HP, there's just good armor and hoping you get hit in the right places. There are technically levels in Grimgar, but to level up, you have to get a certain amount of gold. Now, it's not like the gold is treated as a substitute for XP, it's just proof that you know what you're doing. If you've sold enough goblin claws or furry rings to reach a new adventuring tier, then you probably got enough real-world experience dealing with monsters to justify a change in your tag. Sure, the system is kind of pay to win, so you could theoretically advance without having ever killed a single beast on your own just by selling enough stuff, but if you were to then go on a quest to kill some high-level bounty, you just die instantly because you have no idea what you're doing. And that threat of dying is very real in Grimgar. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything, even though the show is almost a decade old, but let's just say that sometimes things go badly for our heroes. And the characters have to deal with that in the moment and continue to deal with that in the aftermath. There is weight to this world, not just in the beautifully animated fight sequences where you can practically feel every strike, but emotional weight too. Now, I don't think the characters were anything to write home about. In fact, there are a couple who I don't even like. But what what I did like was the many conversations that they had with each other in their downtime. Did it move the story along? Absolutely not. But I didn't mind that. In fact, this might be my favorite aspect of the show, aside from the action. These quick chats after a fight, the little talks in the dead of night, they felt real in a way that not too many shows can capture.
んだよ、眠そうな目しやがって。
この目は生まれつきで、別に眠たいわけじゃないって前にも言ったよな。
This is something I love about Grimgar, but it's also something many people hate. You see, the thing is, there is no story in this show. Alright, well, like there is, but the situation is similar to Cowboy Bebop. Truly a fantastic anime. Great characters, perfect animation, wonderful soundtrack. You've heard all the praise before. But the main story in Cowboy Bebop is not the main reason you watch Cowboy Bebop. Sure, it's there, and, that's fine. But the thing you're mostly watching that show for is the vibe. Space bounty hunters drifting from town to town, living together on a rusty bucket of bolts, always trying to make ends meet and just barely getting by. That's the good stuff. And that's kind of how Grimgar is. It's a show about a group of people just trying to survive. Sure, it can feel a little repetitive at times, but that's also kind of the point. This is their life, and we're just watching a day in that life. And it really does feel like life. What this anime does well is the little things. The sloppy sword swings, the panic movements. Too many anime are too clean. Everyone knows exactly where to hit to finish off their target in one fell swoop and then strike a pose or utter a quip of some kind. That doesn't happen here. Every character fights like their life is on the line because, well, it is. If they don't give it their all or if they just make one simple mistake, that's it. They're done. But what's really special about this show is that this sense of finality isn't reserved for just the human characters. The creatures of Grimgar feel it too. They don't go down easy because they don't want to die. And because they don't want to die, they'll study the movements of their adversaries. They adapt and strategize and protect what's theirs. They aren't just walking meat sacks of XP, they are real living creatures that act like they actually exist outside of enemy encounters. I mean, you even see goblins just hanging out, chilling when they're not killing. The world of Grimgar may not be the most original, but it is dense with detail, and season 1 was just the beginning of the adventure. And also the end, because there is no season 2, and there probably never will be. There's been a lot of speculation as to how this happened. Some people claim that the studio never intended to make a season 2. Others say that 2016 just wasn't ready for a show like this. Plus, ReZero and Konosuba came out the same year, and those two are pretty difficult to compete against. I don't know what the truth is. All I can tell you is my truth. And by that, I mean I'm gonna start complaining about this show now. Whenever someone would recommend me Grimgar, they would always frame it as the realistic Isekai. The one that doesn't sugarcoat fights or shy away from killing off characters. It was something dark and brutal. Why do you think it's got grim in the name? And I mean, look, is the show dark? Sure, I guess. People die, that's kind of dark. But it's not Berserk. I don't even think it's like Goblin Slayer. It is a realistic Isekai though. I can't recall any shows off the top of my head where a character is like, you should probably wear a helmet, and then they actually put on a helmet. But Grimgar has this issue where it selectively applies realism. It's there in certain fight scenes, but not others. It's there in certain interactions, but not others. It's there with certain armor choices, but not others. All right, how about this, right? Skyrim equals Isekai, okay? Grimgar is Skyrim with certain mods, namely stuff like Frostfall and Campfire, and a bunch of CBBE body mods. Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash? No, this is Grimgar of Fantasy and Ass. Yes, thank you for confirming that she's got a dumpy. I'm sure it fart, but I don't need to be constantly reminded that this chick has soccer team bearing hips. I got it the first time. All right, hot take. This show being horny is a bad thing. Now, I need to be careful here because I'm starting to sound like I've come down with a severe case of the woke mind virus, but I think the fan service in Grimgar does a disservice to Grimgar. It creates this confused audience where half of the people are watching for the slow, realistic journey, the struggles these characters go through, and the connections they're able to form with this world and with each other, while the other half are just watching for the thief lady. This is a problem because if you're interested in the realism aspect of this show, you get taken out of the experience when the ecchi stuff pops up. And if you're more interested in the ecchi stuff, then you're probably dropping this show before episode 4 because you're gonna find it extremely boring unless there's a fight to distract you. Now, I don't want to blow the ecchi stuff out of proportion, but it comes up frequently enough that I have to mention it. I've seen some other videos talking about Grimgar and why it failed to get a second season, and there was one that claimed that the slow pace is what killed this show. But if you ask most most of the fans, that slow pace is one of the main reasons why they love the show. Other people will say that the show came out too early, and had it released later, it could have been what Mushoku Tensei became. But I don't think Mushoku Tensei is good just because there was a whole bunch of trash that came out before it, or that people suddenly realized they wanted something more grounded and character-focused after seeing so many soulless power fantasies. Mushoku Tensei is just a good show with a believable world and interesting characters and some of that realism we all love. At least in regards to the first season. I have some issues with season 2. I'm not convinced that the timing of this show doomed its success. To me, it almost feels like A1 Pictures, who also made Sword Art Online if you didn't know, weren't ready to commit to a more realistic, slower kind of isekai. They got cold feet and decided to inject a fair amount of fan service and generic anime escapades into the show to keep the general Japanese audience engaged. Because that's what worked the first time, but it didn't work so much this time. For the record, I haven't read the light novel, so maybe the source material suffers from the same problems. I don't know. All I know is that Grimgar is a good show that could have been a great show. It had a cool art style, a decent soundtrack, and a world that felt real, most of the time. It's still worth a watch, but it does leave at least a little to be desired. Maybe it could have been Mushoku Tensei or ReZero if it had a few more episodes, but sometimes it pays to not have so many episodes. After all, it's better to die a Grimgar than to live long enough to become a shield hero. Anyway, until next time, Ave Maria, Deus Vult, and a big thank you to all the cultured.